Welcome back to the Thornvale Parables, where we uncover the darkest stories hidden in the shadows of seemingly ordinary lives. Today we step into the hush of a forgotten countryside, to a building with too many windows and too few witnesses. It is a place stitched into silence, where children once played, but no one recalls hearing their laughter. This is the macabre mysteries of triplets, siblings, and children beyond all reason. The photograph was found sealed in a Bible, its binding warped by time and something less explainable. It had no date, no names, just a solemn woman in a dark bonnet, standing before a pale building that leaned too far back into the trees. Beside her, 7 children, perfectly spaced, 6 boys, 1 girl, all silent, all pale, all watching. The image, at first glance, is like any old family portrait taken during the latter half of the 19th century. Yet the longer you look, the more the symmetry becomes unnatural. There is a coldness to it. The windows behind them are shuttered, yet a figure appears faintly in the highest one. The woman's dress is clean and neat, but her shoes are soaked in something darker than shadow. And one of the boys, his boots face forward, but his body angles subtly away, as if resisting the stillness forced upon him. No one remembers the name of the town now. The church records were lost to fire, and no parish registry contains the names of the children. But the building still stands, leaning gently, rotting quietly behind a grove of sycamores. Locals call it the Orphan's house, though no formal orphanage was ever registered there. A traveling deacon once wrote in a private letter dated 1884 that he had stopped at a rural homestead where children moved too much in the corner of one's eye and never once made a sound. He was gone the next morning, leaving behind his boots at the doorstep and a note that simply read, "T. Hey, come in threes." Over the next 6 decades, faint records emerge. Twins born to childless women, triplets appearing in towns where no pregnancy was ever seen. Each time, the same description. Ash blonde hair, expressionless faces, a silence too large for their size. And always, always, a woman in modest black, asking if the church had room. You might say it was coincidence, a failing of record keeping, a trick of early photography and fading memories. But there are too many photographs, and always 7. 7 children, arranged unnaturally, never aging, never named. So the question becomes, where did they come from? And why, when asked, did one priest describe them not as siblings, but as echoes? Before we descend into the hidden annals of this story, before we explore the ledger locked in an abandoned sacristy, the burial plots with no stones, and the hymn that names no saints, I need you to listen carefully. This isn't a tale of orphans, it's a tale of replication, of quiet multiplication. And it begins, as all cursed things do, with a house meant only for one. But before we continue the story of the orphan's house, I have one question. Tell me in the comments, what would you do if a photograph in your family Bible showed someone you've never met wearing your childhood clothes? The first written account, at least the first that survived, came from a man of the cloth. Deacon Thaddeus Ryle, itinerant minister and scribal clerk for the Southern Parish Inspection Office, was known for his methodical hand and his refusal to entertain superstition. His journal was meant for record-keeping, not reflection. Yet in the entry marked October 4th, 1882, something in his tone changes. The woman met me at the edge of the property. She did not blink. Her voice was a dry hush, like pages turning in a sealed book. 7 children stood behind her, no sound, no motion, as if their stillness was rehearsed. I asked for names. She offered none. She said only, "We are kept by the house." Ryle had been dispatched to the outskirts of Harrow County to investigate a claim of unlawful guardianship. A letter had reached the parish 2 weeks prior, unsigned, containing only the words, "The children are not hers, they never were." What Deacon Ryle found was not an orphanage, nor a school, nor even a functioning household. The structure appeared older than its material suggested, its boards too pale, its shutters nailed too tightly. He noted that the ground sloped unnaturally downward at the rear of the house, toward a collapsed root cellar ringed in rusted fence iron. He did not step closer. That night, Ryle stayed in the rectory of a nearby chapel where he claimed to hear singing, faint and low, not joyous, but ritualistic. He asked the chapel priest about the house. The priest turned pale and uttered only one word: multiples. According to the journal, Deacon Ryle attempted a second visit the next morning. The woman was gone. So were the children. But the door stood open, and within, the house bore no evidence of habitation. No food, no beds, no clothing. Only a wooden floor scored in 7 places and a wide iron basin in the back room. He left the county that evening. His final note, scribbled on the inside of his travel Bible, read, "I met the children again, but they were smaller now. 3 this time, in the same clothes. The girl had not changed." Thaddeus Ryle vanished a year later during a mission to a coastal parish in Rhode Island. No body was found. Only his boots standing on a dock that faced nothing but fog. His journal was recovered in 1912, hidden behind the altar stone of an abandoned church in Hallowmere. How it traveled there, no one knows, but the entries are real. His hand, unmistakable. And in the final, unnumbered page, beneath smeared ink and a faded sketch of the woman's house, he added a final line: "They were born of silence, and they multiply in absence." The house was never condemned, never boarded up, but the town around it slowly emptied, and by 1890, Harrow County was no longer listed on parish maps. This was not simply a case of children without parents. This was a place where the laws of birth, death, and memory had come unmoored, and they would not be the last to arrive. By 1894, whispers of the children reached deeper into the diocesan records. They were not written plainly, of course. The church does not openly catalog anomalies, but in the margin notes of baptismal ledgers, small remarks surfaced. Baptism refused. Mater ignota. Triplets presented. Parish denies record. Same girl, different name. The records span 13 states, always 3 children at a time, sometimes 5, once 7. No 2 parishes ever received the same woman, and yet the descriptions are identical. Dark bonnet, pale dress, eyes too steady. She spoke the local dialect. She answered questions with perfect ecclesiastical formality. She never gave a surname. In 1896, Father Bellamy of New Gilead wrote in a hidden codex, known as the Book of Irregular Visitations, that a woman came during Lent with 4 boys and a girl. She requested baptism before sundown. When he refused, citing the absence of birth records, she did not argue. Instead, she placed 5 candles on the chapel floor, all unlit, and said, "They have been born by pattern, not by sin." That night, the bell in the chapel tower rang once, though the rope had long been severed. Within a week, 5 children were seen playing near the well behind the chapel. None were parishioners. None could be identified. They did not speak. They wore identical shoes, and they vanished before dusk. The well was sealed, the records burned. Father Bellamy left New Gilead under what he called sanctified distress. There was no investigation. Only silence, and in silence the woman returned. In 1901, deep within a side sacristy of the Our Lady of Consolation Chapel, an altar boy cleaning beneath a rotted cabinet discovered a leather-bound ledger, unlike the others. Its cover bore no parish seal. Its pages were blank, save for 2 columns, one marked number, the other pattern. The first page read, 1. 3 boys, same eyes. 2 girls, twin veins. 3, 4 boys, 1 does not mirror. And so it went, not with names or baptismal rites, but replications, measurements, ratios. The children were not being recorded as souls. They were being studied as repetitions. This ledger, never officially entered into diocesan record, contains 48 entries, each corresponding, we believe, to one of the woman's appearances, and it is here that the true horror takes shape. Because entry 27 reads, "Children, new location. Reversal holds. Eyes begin to darken." The term reversal appears again in entries 32 and 36. No definition is offered, but a pattern emerges. Every 7th entry lists 7 children. And every seventh entry notes a change, not in the woman, but in the children. Their features blur, their eyes no longer reflect. One child begins to hum, a hymn not listed in any known psalter. On the final page, a single line: they are no longer born, they are kept. The ledger was lost during the flooding of the chapel in 1910. Some say it was washed away. Others claim it was taken by the woman herself, who returned once more that year. But we have fragments, and we have the photographs. In each, the same child appears, sometimes taller, sometimes older, always with the same eyes. By this time, even the church ceased attempts at explanation. Because when birth no longer means beginning, then what truly ends? In the brittle winter of 1903, a chapel organist named Lysander Coe arrived in the parish of Ellensward to fill in for a retired choir master. A mild man with thin fingers and an iron sense of rhythm, he documented his experiences in small, precise journal entries. For the first month, his records speak only of icy floors, out-of-tune reeds, and a leaking roof above the vestry. But then came the entry marked Third Sunday of Lent. 7 children arrived just before Matins. No parish family claimed them. They sat in the front pew, unmoving, unspeaking. When I began the Kyrie, they stared at me as though they already knew the chords. He described a melody that entered his fingers not from his mind, but from somewhere outside the room, an airless tune, with no lyrics, yet full of syllables unfit for human mouths. He played it once, only once. The moment the notes filled the chapel, the children stood, not reverently, not in worship, but like a single limb moving across multiple bodies. They did not sing, yet the sound, he wrote, persisted beyond the pipes. Congregants remember nothing, only that the bells rang before the hour, and the candles refused to stay lit. Lysander fled that same night, abandoning his journal beneath the organ bench. His final words: the hymn plays itself. It does not end, it waits. The next Sunday, the front pew was empty, but in the candle wax pooled on the floor, someone, or something, had dragged 7 fingers through the melted white, forming the same rhythm Lysander wrote out in his margins. That hymn is never spoken of now, but it remains carved faintly into the edge of the old organ, just beneath middle C. Parishioners call it the silent note. Organists know not to strike it. Those who do often leave by dusk, whispering of children in the rafters, and one boy, always last to vanish, mouthing words no one taught him. It was always the girl, pale dress, curls tied neatly behind her ears, eyes like unfired clay, gray, unfinished, waiting. She appears in 14 photographs between 1850 and 1910. In each, she stands slightly apart from the others, not by design, but by something spatial. The air around her refuses closeness. Objects cast no shadow upon her. In 2 images, her feet do not fully touch the ground. No one ever recalled her name. In 1887, a midwife in Salem's Hollow wrote of assisting a woman in black who delivered a girl with no cry, no blood, no tension. The midwife swore the child had no umbilical cord, just a thin, black thread that turned to ash once severed. She told no one for years. Only when she saw the girl again in a photograph inside a traveling priest's Bible did she speak. But by then, the priest had vanished, and the girl, identical, had appeared in a school drawing from another town, dated 2 decades later. At St. Alora's School for Girls, a charcoal sketch hangs in a locked closet. It depicts 7 students standing in a row. One of them is wrong. Her proportions are off, her eyes unfinished. The teacher who received the drawing hanged herself a week later. No note, only the word unearned carved into her prayer book. This same girl, unchanged, is etched faintly into the pew of a chapel in Fernwick. The carving is small but exact. Her hands are pressed together, her mouth slightly open, and behind her, nothing. No background, no sanctuary, just void. Children have tried to give her a name. They whisper guesses during Mass, but their lips begin to split by the 3rd syllable. bleeding not from injury but from misalignment, as though language itself resists defining her. She has been seen in dreams, by clergy, by orphans, by mothers who have lost more than one child. Each describes the same vision, a field of ash, a girl holding a candle with no flame. Her mouth opens, the dream ends. Some say she is the source, others say she is the lock, not the door. But all agree on one thing: she does not age, and she never arrives first. In 1905, a small township called Kettlebrook filed a brief report to the regional diocese. 3 children arrived at St. Fallon's. No family claimed them. They answer to the names of parish dead. The priest who wrote it, Father Ellis Brain, had served the township for over 30 years. He was no stranger to rural hysteria, but this, he claimed, was different. The children bore not only the names, but the faces of 3 parish boys who had drowned in a flooded ravine the year prior. Their bodies had been buried, their graves sealed. And yet the new children remembered prayers no longer taught. They walked barefoot in frost. They asked for teachers who had been dead for decades. One girl, Anna, reached out to touch her mother. The woman fainted instantly. When she awoke, she did not speak for the rest of her life. She simply held her rosary and repeated one phrase in Latin: non rediit e carne. She did not return of the flesh. Father Brain conducted a test. He held Mass in private using a psalter dated before the flood. Only the children responded correctly, intoning verses that had been redacted a generation ago. One boy, when prompted to recite the Gloria, uttered a sentence no one had heard before: "Blessed be the child returned from absence, who needs not breath to know grace." The diocese refused to investigate. When Brain sent for permission to exorcise, the reply came simply: "No sacrament applies." 3 weeks later, the church bell rang 12 times at midnight. The priest's journal ends abruptly with the words, "They are not ours, but they remember being." No records remain of what happened next. The children were never seen again, but 7 fresh pews were added to the chapel that year. Not replaced, added. The wood was darker than the rest, and under each one, carved faintly beneath the seat, "I was him, I was not." Some say the children weren't possessed. They were substitutions. By 1908, the phenomenon had grown too widespread to ignore. Parishes began referring to it in hushed tones as the multiples, a name not chosen but inherited, passed from church to church like a candle losing flame. The multiples were never officially denounced. The church has no language for children who do not die and yet are never truly born. But in the margins of forbidden scrolls, monks and archivists recorded a pattern. Every 27 years, every 7th visitation, every time, more. The veil between what should be and what persists thins. Some children blur, blending into one another, appearing in mirrors when alone, showing 2 shadows in candlelight. Not evil, but misplaced. A bishop in Harrowmere issued a secret encyclical: "Do not baptize the multiples. It binds what should remain drifting." Others believe differently. A hidden sect within the church, never named, never known, began collecting these children. They built sanctuaries beneath ruined chapels, stone vaults where the children could dwell without echo, without mirrors, without names. These sanctuaries had no altars, only soil, no relics, only chalk symbols and crucifixes hung upside down, not in blasphemy, but in reversal, mirroring the children who never mirrored others. But something went wrong. In one vault, the chalk melted into the walls. In another, the children began carving windows into the stone, not physically, but with their eyes. One girl stared at a wall so long light passed through it. The priest who saw it burned his own eyelids with candle wax. His final note read, "They are not evil, but they are residue." The vaults were sealed, the sect vanished, and the children were not seen again, until 1910, when the woman returned to the house with too many windows, and this time she came alone. She knocked once, the door opened inward. Inside, 7 chairs sat in a circle, each facing out, each holding a photograph, each photograph showing only her, and from upstairs, the sound of children humming a hymn with no words. By autumn of 1910, the woman had been seen again, only briefly, walking the edge of a parish graveyard in Willow's End. She did not speak, she did not turn her head, but she left something behind, a wooden box sealed in wax, discovered beneath the altar days later. Inside were 7 small portraits, each painted in oil and linen, delicate, hand-rendered, unsigned. Each child was posed in profile, their eyes closed. On the back of each canvas, a date and a single word. Echo, twin, hush, hymn, trace, answer, candle. The priest, Father Morlan, hung the portraits in the side chapel, believing them to be orphan memorials, unclaimed, unnamed, but no less deserving of reverence. The first night they hung, the wind refused to move through the chapel. Candles did not flicker, bells did not ring. But by the 3rd night, something began to change. The children's eyes opened. Not all at once, slowly. By week's end, 5 eyes were visibly ajar, painted irises staring not at the viewer, but just past them, towards something behind. Parishioners began to avoid the chapel. Children who lingered near the portraits complained of headaches. One collapsed, muttering a verse from an unknown book. She, who carried 7, returned them without breath. The priest removed the portraits, locked them in the vestry, but by the next morning the paintings had returned to the walls, hung perfectly in place. This time 6 eyes were open, and in one a reflection could be seen, a pale house with too many windows. Father Morlan fled. His personal missal was found abandoned, turned to a page with an annotation not in his hand. The 7th eye opens when the memory is named. The portraits remain at Willow's End, but the 7th painting is missing. Locals whisper that it follows the viewer, appearing in old albums, in attic boxes, even in family Bibles. The girl with unfinished features, her eyes closed, for now. And if the 7th opens, no one yet has described what it sees. In a remote field outside Elbridge Parish, a stone lies half-buried in hallowed ground. Not a gravestone, but smooth and rounded. An altar fragment from an abandoned monastery, according to early diocesan maps. Yet locals refer to it only as the Singing Stone. First mentioned in a 1911 pastoral letter, the stone was said to hum softly at dusk, not with tone, but with something between breath and word. A vibration so faint it moved candle flames but not grass. No birds land on it. No insects crawl across it. It is always warm, even in winter. In 1912, a novitiate named Alwyn Corrin was assigned to study its properties. He camped beside the stone for 12 nights. His journal records a recurring dream, a circle of children holding hands, humming a melody that repeated without end. Each time, a new child appeared, until on the final night, there were 7. He awoke with blood behind his ears. On the 12th night, Corrin wrote this: "The stone is not singing, it is remembering." He left the cloth a year later, said nothing more, only whispered a question to his confessor. If the altar remembers the offering, must it also remember the ones who came empty? Some believe the stone is a boundary marker, not of land, but of memory, a place where forgotten children gather. In 1915, the humming ceased, but those who have visited since say they feel watched, not maliciously, but knowingly, like being recognized by something older than sight, and carved now beneath the stone's edge, something not visible before. Where the 7th sat, no name was needed. The ground around the stone remains unblessed. No parish will claim it. But at dusk, if you listen closely, the grass shifts in rhythm, as though someone were walking in slow circles, humming with no breath. In the winter of 1913, the town of Briarfall submitted a peculiar census return. Though 76 homes were occupied and 114 adults recorded, not a single child was listed. The census taker, Silas Grieve, returned twice, certain he'd made an error, but each home confirmed the same. We had children. Once. They remembered the names, the clothes, the lullabies sung by firelight, but not the faces, not the years, not the end. St. Elspeth's chapel still held small pews, scattered hymnals with childlike handwriting, and 3 abandoned cribs in the nursery room. But the baptismal font was dry, sealed with wax, and the parish bell tower, once rung daily by altar boys, was silent. On his third visit, Grieve found a page tacked to the chapel door, a torn sheet of psalm notation with only one phrase repeated: "Taken, but not lost." That same day, a letter arrived at the diocese. No return address. Inside was a photograph, sepia, faded. 7 children standing before the chapel. None were identified, but one, center right, wore the collar of the parish choir, and the girl on the left wore no shoes, her feet slightly above the ground. Father Amos of St. Elspeth's wrote to the bishop, "They were ours, but they are not the same." Weeks later, the chapel collapsed in on itself. The stonework buckled, as if the foundation had been hollowed from beneath. No one heard it fall. Today, Briar Falls still exists on maps, but visitors report a stillness there, as though something had been excised, not violently, but deliberately, as if memory itself had been harvested. And in the dirt where the chapel once stood, a pattern of small footprints returns each year during Lent, 7 at a time, always circling, never crossing. Wellspring Parish was founded in 1802 atop a natural spring said to have healing properties. By 1914, the spring had long dried up, but the original well still stood behind the chapel, sealed shut with iron and prayer. It had not been opened in decades, until the morning of Pentecost. That Sunday, parishioners arrived to find the iron grate removed, not broken, unlocked, set aside carefully, as though returned by the one who once placed it. From the depths of the well came no smell, no wind, no moisture, only silence. A silence too perfect to be natural. Birds did not sing, leaves did not rustle, even the water in the font refused to ripple. When a young boy approached the well, he claimed to hear voices, not speaking but remembering. He placed his hand on the rim and collapsed, mouth open, lungs full of breath, but unable to exhale. He lived. But from that day forward, he hummed one note endlessly, the same note reported by Lysander Coe. 7 days later, 7 children arrived in the parish yard, pale, still, unaccompanied. None spoke, but each held a small, waterlogged book. Only one was dry, the girl's. Inside, no writing, only 7 pages, each with a single handprint. The parish priest took the books and placed them in the chapel. He locked the door, but by nightfall, the books were back at the well's edge, open to the same page, and on the inner lid of the well, newly visible, what is drawn forth must never have risen. The priest ordered the well resealed, but the silence remained, and that night in every home water ceased to boil. The flame would catch, but the water would not respond, as if the spring beneath had chosen stillness. The children were never seen again, but the girl's book is still held in the diocesan archives. They say if you touch the page and hold your breath, you will hear your own name spoken, but from beneath. When the parish records were finally pried loose from the mildew-choked filing cabinets of the abandoned rectory, one stood out among the rest, not because of what it contained, but what it omitted. It was the birth log for the year 1895, and it was clean, untouched, except for one page. That page had been scratched nearly bare, as though someone with a desperate hand had tried to write and erase at once. The ink had bled through the parchment, soaked so deep that the paper tore at the slightest touch. Only 2 words could be read in the surviving corner: "Still listening." That same year, the orphan's house was inspected by a newly assigned circuit priest named Elias Kinnock. He was a calm, logical man, trained in matters of charity and discipline, not superstition. But after only 2 nights in the house, he returned to the parish shaken and pale, claiming the house whispers beneath your breath. Kinnock described hearing small feet running across the upper floors even when no children were present. He found a row of identical shoes lined by the hearth, each polished and placed at an exact angle, but every morning a new pair was added, muddy, damp, always 3 sizes smaller than the rest. He wrote in his final note before leaving his post, "The boards echo without pressure. They remember the ones not yet here." It would have been dismissed as exhaustion had it not matched so closely the reports from visiting nurses a decade later. In 1907, 3 Sisters of Mercy entered the house for a wellness audit. One left catatonic. One could not recall ever going. The third, Sister Magdalene, wrote that the children smiled without using their mouths and that they never blinked in unison. Most disturbingly, she noted something buried in the floorboards of the Eastern nursery, a shallow dip in the wood, perfectly oval, as though shaped by the back of a human skull. Not once, but repeatedly, etched in over years. The curvature was too exact to be incidental, too human, and there were 3 such indentations, always 3. The house, Sister Magdalene insisted, had never been empty. It only appeared to be so. When investigators arrived the following year, the floor had been replaced. New planks, no sign of markings. But in a sealed closet on the 2nd floor, they found something stranger. 3 antique cribs stacked tightly together, yet inside, no mattress, no bedding, no sign of decay, just salt. 3 mounds of salt, shaped to resemble sleeping infants, damp, leaking slightly at the base. The cribs were burned that night, but the echo in the floor has never stopped. Hikers in the region have reported hearing lullabies with no source, children's laughter, where no roads lead. Locals say the house breathes once a year, and the air it exhales smells like wet linen and rotted milk. By 1910, all official acknowledgement of the orphan's house had ceased. No church listed it, no town claimed it. It was no longer spoken of in newspapers nor whispered among the clergy. Yet still, it breathed. It existed. And most troubling of all, it grew. In the archives of a defunct funeral home just outside Morrow Hill, a tattered ledger was found wedged between floor joists during renovation. Its contents were deeply unsettling. Across 40 pages were hand-scrawled burial records, but each marked with an identical frantic caveat. Body never received. The entries repeated page after page. Infant male, approx 3 wires. Arranged by parish, body missing. Infant male, approx 3 wires. Delivered, then vanished. Infant male, approx 3 wires. Scheduled for interment, no arrival. Each record showed the same entry date, each with the same brief physical description. Identical height, weight, hair color, all reported by different parishes, miles apart, different years, same child. The funeral director, a man named Bartholomew Crest, left a handwritten note at the back of the ledger. It was not intended for filing. It was a confession of sorts. His penmanship degraded across the page, as if written under distress, or worse, with something watching. His note reads, "They do not die. They return. Each year another is seen, always walking the same path, always 3 paces apart. They know me. They forgive nothing. This is not resurrection. It is rehearsal." Crest was later institutionalized after attempting to board up the town cemetery by nightfall, hammering each gate closed with strips of braided cloth, torn from what he claimed were children's aprons. He was found murmuring a single phrase over and over: "Don't bury what wasn't born." Even more disturbing than the ledger itself was the accompanying sketch, crudely drawn in the margins. A floor plan, 3 rooms, 3B. It's 3 doors, but no windows, and in the center, a small circle marked us. When the renovation crew returned, the ledger was gone. They hadn't touched it. No one had. But in its place was a single child's shoe, aged but unworn, sitting upright, facing the wall. Since then, local superstition warns never to leave a room with 3 mirrors facing one another, nor to light 3 candles on an altar. The belief is simple, ancient, and chilling. 3 invites them back. And yet, the orphan's house, it has always had 3 floors, and each floor holds 3 rooms. In the fall of 1903, a midwife by the name of Clara Winslow was sent by the Sisters of Providence to assist in birthing triplets in a nearby village. She never returned, but nearly a century later, her journal surfaced, sealed inside a wall cavity during renovations at the abandoned orphan's house. The leather was dry, brittle, the ink strangely preserved. What it revealed was not a diary of medicine, but of haunting. Clara writes, "They were not born. They were waiting. I did not help them arrive. I simply noticed when they appeared. She describes being guided not by screams of labor or contractions, but by music, a slow, lilting tune like a lullaby hummed underwater. No one else in the village reported hearing it. When Clara entered the home, the mother lay still, not dead, but trance-like. Her eyes rolled white, her hands folded as if in prayer. Beside her stood a child of about 4 years, silent, smiling faintly, holding a spool of thread. The triplets were already swaddled, already sleeping. No blood, no cries, no time. Clara panicked, but found her legs unwilling to leave the room. She describes her hands moving without command, wrapping the newborns in linen soaked in brine. She couldn't recall where the brine came from, or why each child had a faint mark on the back of the neck, a circle, flanked by 3 dots. Days passed. Clara had no memory of sleeping, but the journal documents time. Each entry ends with the same 4 words: still 3, still watching. Weeks later, Clara wrote that the house itself began to speak. Through wood, through wind. She awoke one night to find 3 children standing by her bed, not infants, toddlers now, but the same ones. They said one word, each: hold, keep, stay. I wept. I obeyed. The final page was written in what appears to be graphite, scratched in haste. It reads, "Do not come for me. I have been made a mother. Of their kind. They do not grow. They multiply. And they know your name before you arrive." The journal ended abruptly, yet Clara's body was never found. Locals later claimed a figure could sometimes be seen in the uppermost window of the orphan's house, knitting by candlelight, rocking slowly, a silhouette surrounded by 3 cribs. The wind around the house is always colder, and the thread never seems to run out. Among all relics recovered from the orphan's house, none inspired more dread than the Cradle of Echoes. The name came later, coined by a nun who collapsed upon touching it. It appeared harmless at first, a simple wooden cradle, hand-carved, painted in fading white. But its dimensions were wrong. Too long for 1 infant, too narrow for 2, yet perfectly sized for 3, if stacked. And stacked they were. 3 wax dolls were found inside, swaddled in stitched shrouds, but not fabric, preserved church veils, stitched together with hair. A note lay beneath the cradle in a tin box, faded but intact. This holds them only until they split again. When the 3rd breathes, they begin once more. Each doll bore a number on its foot, I, 2, 3, and each was made from beeswax, tinted in different shades, bone white, ash gray, and dried blood red. When one doll was removed from the cradle, a faint sound would echo through the room, a creak, like wood under strain, or laughter from a closed mouth. 3 paranormal investigators entered the room in 1978. Only one returned. He was later found in a motel bathtub, repeatedly whispering, "There was no 4th. There was no 4th." He had removed doll 2. The others were never found. The cradle now resides in a locked vault beneath the diocese archives. No photographs are permitted, no clergy speak of it. But the janitor who polishes the floors claims he often hears lullabies in the vents. He does not have children. He never did. And sometimes, when he leaves at night, there are 3 footprints in the dust behind him, leading back toward the vault. They found it during renovations in 1911, beneath the parlor of the orphan's house, beneath the rotted floorboards and a square of brick that rang hollow when tapped. The workers had been paid to repurpose the old home into a boarding school for disabled children. They were instructed to retain the shape of the building, but modernize its interiors. It was a lie, meant to conceal something, because when the bricks were pulled up and the slab beneath lifted, what they saw was no cellar. It was a room of portraits, dozens, hung from nails rusted into blackened wooden walls, unlit, molded over, but still visible. Each portrait was nearly identical. 7 children, always in the same positions, the same somber woman to the side. But there were differences, a different shape of collar, a different ribbon, a curl falling left instead of right. And always, one child whose face was scratched out, either gouged by fingernail or knife, always the one farthest to the right. The workers fled before finishing the job. Only one stayed behind, an apprentice named Thomas Gerald. He claimed he'd seen the eyes in one of the portraits move. That night he was heard screaming in the woods. When they found him, he was cradling an old photograph, murmuring the names of his own siblings. They were all alive, safe in Ohio, but he wouldn't speak to them again. Not after he saw what was in the portrait he carried. Not after he pointed and said, "That one has my brother's ears, and I never told anyone that." The house was boarded up once again. The project was declared cursed and left unfinished. And the portraits? They remain unburnt. They refuse to catch fire. The local priest who attempted to cleanse the room claimed the soot left on his robe formed the outlines of 7 small hands. In 1897, a midwife named Helen Brandt recorded an unusual experience in her leather-bound journal, later recovered in an estate sale, buried in a box of rosary beads and yellowed lace gloves. Helen had served in 3 counties and never lost a mother in labor, but she'd never seen a woman like the one who arrived that March. She came alone, no horse, no carriage, just walking, barefoot despite the frost. Her face was veiled, her stomach round. Helen claimed the woman said nothing, not a single word. She simply held out a bundle of dried lilies and pointed to the floor. There was no blood, no contractions, and yet, within hours, 3 infants were delivered, silent, healthy, pale as snowfall. Helen noted that their eyes never blinked, and the moment they were born, the mother turned away, stood, and walked into the woods. She did not take them. When Helen attempted to take the children to the sheriff's station, she found her cart stuck in the mud. Then the mule collapsed, and when she looked at the babies, they were gone. Only lilies remained, dried, tied with black string. Years later, Helen would swear she saw one of those children again, unaged, sitting in a pew during Sunday Mass, staring at her, eyes still open, still unblinking. She left that day and never returned to the town. She never gave birth, never married, but on her deathbed she confessed to her sister, "I had children, 3 of them, but they were never mine, and they never stopped watching." In 1904, an anonymous letter was sent to the Archdiocese of New Orleans. It contained no return address, only a passage from the book of Genesis, underlined in red, "And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep." Enclosed were 7 small cards, like those used in baptism ceremonies. Each had a name written in careful cursive, but each name was crossed out in red ink, then rewritten, then crossed out again. The same process repeated, 7 cards, 7 attempts per name, until all names were obliterated. On the back of each card was a single phrase, "Do not give them names, they do not belong to language." Church officials buried the cards. They were later exhumed, by whom, no one knows, but in 1923 they were found nailed to the inside of a confessional booth in Shreveport. That booth has since been locked and sealed. The wood continues to split inward, as if resisting something still inside. Linguists who analyzed the cards found faint impressions beneath the scribbled ink, attempts at naming that blurred the line between Latin, Aramaic, and something much older. The phonetics did not align with any human tongue. One name, half visible, has appeared 3 more times in unrelated manuscripts from entirely different regions, a word that does not translate. But the priests who read it aloud have all reported the same vision that night: a black staircase, a woman in a veil, and 7 children in a room of mirrors, each mirror facing inward, infinitely repeating. In 1910, the orphan's house was reported as destroyed by fire. Local newspapers described a total collapse of the central wing, citing lightning as the probable cause. But when surveyors returned a week later, they found the building intact. Externally, it was untouched, the shingles undisturbed, the shutters still closed. But inside, everything was ash. The walls had peeled, the beams had charred. No animals, insects, or birds would enter. Even flies avoided it. One photographer documented the interior. He used a long exposure plate camera and captured 6 usable images. Each one came back altered. In every frame, the walls curved unnaturally, as if leaning toward a center not visible in the photo. The shadows bled upward, and in one frame, Directly behind a broken pew stood the faintest silhouette of a child's hand. Only the hand, as if pressed gently against the lens. The photographer refused to work again. His wife claimed he never recovered, speaking only in numbers, repeating 7, 3, 1, none in various orders, until he died in a sanatorium. When a group of local boys attempted to set the house ablaze again in 1912, they found the walls would not catch. One boy wrote in chalk on the front door, "It already burned, but not for us." The chalk never faded, not even after 20 years of storms. And to this day, when the wind moves through the dead trees that crowd the back lot of the property, some say you can hear a lullaby echoing, soft, unfamiliar, and sung by too many voices at once. 7, they whisper, always 7. By 1903, the house was officially condemned. Too much rot in the foundation, too many reports of animal bones in the floorboards. And yet, every year in spring, the glass was freshly cleaned as if by unseen hands. A surveyor brought in by the county recorded one final inventory of the orphan's house before demolition. He described the rooms in detail: dust-choked pews, rusted hinges, a cradle made entirely of twisted wire. But one detail stood out in his report, written with an uncharacteristic tremor. "There are always children in the window pane, though no children are in the house." He did not mean visible behind the window. He meant within it, faint impressions pressed into the wavy old glass, like frozen silhouettes of faces that had once leaned close. Some were open-mouthed, as if whispering something into the world outside. Others bore eyes that, he wrote, do not belong to children or to anything that dies. He documented 7 faces, always 7, in separate windows, all identical. When a replacement team was sent to verify, the house was found locked from the inside, yet no one had entered. When the team returned with a locksmith, the glass had gone fogged, sealed over with condensation from within, though the house was dry. Locals whispered again of the triplets, but now they spoke not of children who arrived, but of those who reappeared. A woman from the next county came forward claiming she'd seen her son, dead at birth, peering from the 3rd-floor window. Another swore she saw her miscarried twins standing in the field beyond the house, holding hands. These were not sightings of hope. They were sightings of mockery. The faces were wrong, stretched just slightly, like someone trying too hard to remember the shape of love. A priest, once brave enough to walk the halls at dusk, claimed he heard a lullaby coming from the windowsills. He said it wasn't Sue. It was breathed, and that when he looked closer, there were finger smears on the inside of the panes, tracing words he would not repeat. When asked what he remembered, he only said, "They're not growing, they're repeating." Eventually, the surveyor went missing. His final note, found in his satchel on the church steps, bore only a short sentence in Latin: "Non sunt liberi, sunt representationes." They are not children, they are representations. And this is the moment when the story changes shape, when the children are no longer considered lost or stolen, but copied. Their identities, their forms, reused like verses in a corrupted hymn. They do not die. They shift, appear in different names, different years, in different homes, always as siblings. But something is always missing. Some spark, some unmistakable thread that tells a mother this is not her child. And still, the windows remain. 7 panes, 7 faces. Watching from behind time, there was once a woman who said no. In 1905, a midwife named Evelyn Berrick served several counties in the lowlands surrounding the orphan's house. She was known for her calm presence, her skill in breech deliveries, and, most notably, her absolute refusal to attend to the house on Sycamore Hollow. She kept a private journal, discovered decades later beneath floorboards in her cottage, wrapped in muslin. It chronicled years of service, but something shifted in her entries beginning October 1897. That was the first time she wrote of the triplets. "I do not believe in devils," she began, "but I believe in mimicry." The mother had no name, only a voice and a request. 7 will arrive, but only 3 must cry, she said. The others already know the world. Evelyn refused, not out of fear, but because, she claimed, The woman was not pregnant. She was hollow. Her stomach was flat, her skin was cold, but she insisted the birthing must begin. When Evelyn demanded proof of pregnancy, the woman lifted her blouse, and underneath was not flesh, but cloth, a black wrap, knotted and stitched, holding 7 tiny limbs wrapped in silk. "They have been waiting," the woman said, "and you've helped deliver worse." Evelyn fled. Over the following months, she was haunted by shadows that resembled children but behaved like shadows, flattening themselves under doors, moving across ceilings. The triplets appeared in her dreams first. Then, one afternoon, in her mirror, all 3 had her eyes. She wrote, "It is not birth they want, it is placement. They enter the world not through the womb, but through the heart's absence." She began carrying iron, marking her windows with salt. She warned others, begging them not to deliver children from the hollow. Some laughed, others listened, but most births proceeded without her. Eventually, Evelyn vanished from public life. Her last entry was dated June 1908. It read, "They no longer ask, they deliver themselves. I hear 7 voices in the well. One of them calls me mother. The well was found sealed. No water inside, just mirrors, stacked like bricks." This journal changed everything. It reframed the children not as orphans, but as insertions, deliberate anomalies, placed like memories in grieving minds, born not of flesh, but of vacancy. Evelyn was never seen again, but every spring, fresh lilies appear on her doorstep, always 3, never more, never less. The triplets are not just echoes, they are intentions, not alive, not dead, just waiting for an opening. In the attic of a chapel on the outskirts of Black Hollow lies a rotted ledger, untouched by time or sunlight. Bound in ash wood and sealed with bone clasps, it belonged to the Hollow Choir, an unofficial sect of local singers who once performed funerary rites for children. The choir's existence was secret. The reasons are not. Their hymns were not of comfort, but containment. The ledger lists only first names, always in groups of 3, each followed by a date and one phrase, "Return to harmony." Researchers believe these were not baptisms, but musical rites meant to bind something, perhaps a spirit or an imitation thereof. One entry reads, "Thomas, Emery, Jude, June 4th, 1894. Harmony held. One voice failed." The next entry contains a correction. 3 reappeared. Additional containment required. The lyrics of the Hollow Choir were transcribed phonetically in a language no one has since translated. The tones are said to mimic the pitch and timbre of a child's whisper, but reversed, so that what is heard is not sung, but absorbed. One historian claimed the melody causes headaches if read aloud. Another went deaf in one ear after playing the notes on a harpsichord. The original parchment had to be stored in lead-lined drawers. The choir stopped singing in 1901 after one performance during a summer funeral left 7 children catatonic. They had not known the dead girl, but each of them afterward drew the same image, a house with 7 windows and 3 figures standing before it. The choir's leader, Brother Eliam, was last seen kneeling before the building on Sycamore Hollow, mouth stitched shut with communion wire. On his chest, a burned phrase, "Wrong refrain." His body was never buried. He was returned to harmony. This section of the story reveals what the church could not admit, that the triplets and their recurring siblings are part of a musical pattern, thas. At their births, placements, and appearances all follow a rhythm, a broken hymn. And now that the singing has stopped, the repetition continues, without containment, without harmony. Only the refrain remains. The bell tower on Sycamore Hollow was removed in 1910 after structural decay. But during the dismantling, workers found something unexpected, a mirror. It had no frame, just a pane of glass, nailed to the inside of the bell housing. It faced inward. One worker described it as watching itself. Another refused to continue after seeing what he believed to be a reflection of himself as a child, though he had never lived in this town. The mirror was removed and taken to the local courthouse for inspection. Within days, the clerk who documented its arrival went blind. His last entry read, "7 faces, none mine." The mirror was returned to the tower, but the tower no longer existed, so it was buried, in salt, beneath the house. But that was not the end. Each time a child went missing in town, especially twins, especially triplets, fresh cracks would appear in the glass, not randomly, but like spider legs reaching toward the center. And in that center, a small, circular smudge that never faded, the size of an infant's palm. This was not a mirror, it was a gate, or perhaps a memory, or both. One priest claimed it was the reason the triplets could reappear, that the children were never born, but merely reflected, projected again and again through memory, grief, or ritual. What is a mirror if not repetition? And what is a bell tower if not the place where all sounds echo? The mirror remains sealed, but the cracks continue to form. And now they reach beyond the glass. When the orphanage was formally sealed in 1910, a final inventory was taken by a deputy cleric sent by the diocese. His list included typical artifacts, hymnals, pews, rotted linens, but near the bottom, hastily scribbled and circled twice in pencil, was a final object, one blackened mirror, unmovable. The mirror, roughly 6 feet tall and framed in worm-eaten walnut, had stood in the second-floor nursery. It faced no window. It reflected a room that should have been empty. The cleric, according to later letters never meant for publication, described the mirror as resistant to light. Even when torches or lanterns were held up to its surface, the reflection remained overcast, as if lit by storm clouds. And then there were the faces. "Not mine," he wrote. "Not one face I saw was mine." He claimed to see 7 children in its reflection, though the room behind him was bare. When he turned, nothing. When he returned his gaze to the mirror, the children stood closer, still, unmoving. But what disturbed him most were the eyes, not empty, occupied, as if something lived behind them, not within them. Eventually, the mirror was covered with heavy cloth and nailed to the floor. A note was hung from the frame in Latin: "Do not show yourself to what has already seen you." But decades later, that mirror was found again during renovations. A visiting priest claimed to have removed the cloth, if only briefly. What he saw made him weep and pray for hours in the hallway, too shaken to speak. The building was boarded up within the week. What if a mirror doesn't reflect the self, but the selves that wait? What if our image is not the original, but merely one replication among many? In the orphan's house, it seems, nothing ever truly disappeared. It only became one of many. There is only one written account of someone attempting to name the children. Sister Eloisa, a postulant assigned to the orphanage briefly in 1897, kept a private diary, most of it mundane. But across 4 pages, a peculiar ritual appears. She describes trying to give names to the children, who had never been officially baptized nor recorded. She assigned each child a name from the Book of Tobit: Raphael, Tobias, Anna. She even whispered these names as they slept, if they slept at all. But on the 4th night, she wrote something chilling. "The names will not stick. I call them, but they do not turn. I try again, and one child turns, but another mouth says the name." The children began rearranging themselves after that, sitting in different orders, pairing into mirrored positions. One day, all 7 sat with their hands crossed identically, except for one, who smiled. A smile she had never seen before. On the final page before her handwriting abruptly stops, Sister Eloisa wrote, "I think I have named something that does not wish to be named. I feel it now, multiplying behind my tongue." No record exists of where she went next. Her name was struck from the convent ledger, but 1 year later, another novice found a small note lodged in the chapel's hymn book. It simply read, "Do not try to name what was never born." Not all parts of the orphanage were accessible. One section, referred to in blueprints but never appearing in physical layout, was called the inner ward. No visible entry existed, no door, no stair, but every child who passed through the orphanage mentioned it in some way. They called it the hush place. One boy, adopted in 1901 and later institutionalized, would repeatedly draw the same image: A square room with 7 cribs, each touching wall to wall, and a circle in the center. In every drawing, the cribs changed shape. Sometimes they were iron, sometimes wood, but always 7, and always empty, except the shadows. One drawing bore a caption written in trembling hand, "Where the quiet waits to speak." Attempts to locate this room failed, but a curious anomaly exists in the floorboards. A small vent-like space in the east corridor where sound never echoes. No matter what is spoken into it, nothing returns, not even breath. A worker once dropped a match into the crevice and saw it vanish as if swallowed. But when he placed his ear to the floor, he swore he heard breathing. 7 rhythms, no lungs. Was this room a metaphor, a child's invention, or a place that exists between plans, never built, but remembered? Maybe it was not a room for children, but for the blueprint of them, for the arrangement, for the hush. Stored in a locked drawer beneath the altar was a thin, leather-bound book labeled simply, "Return." The first half of the pages are filled with names, dated, catalogued, and signed by various hands from 1852 to 1907, but the ink changes near the end. The handwriting becomes identical, page after page. Every entry from 1908 onward appears written by the same hand. No matter who made the record, it always returns to the same looping tight script. The entries begin to repeat. 7 names, again and again, sometimes slight variations, sometimes mirrorings, sometimes whole names reversed or palindromic like Ina, Anna, Na. But then, on the final pages, the entries begin filling themselves. Pencil markings appear overnight. New names, variations of the original 7, appear in tighter, smaller script until the margins are full. One line, written in black ink and underlined 6 times, simply reads, "They come in phrases, not names." The book was sealed in glass. Later visitors said they could hear faint scratching behind the display case. When finally removed for preservation, the pages began to curl inward. The writing turned to symbols, tight spirals, overlapping eyes, and childlike drawings of houses without doors. Who was writing? What were they trying to preserve? And why did the entries begin anew every 33rd day, even after the orphanage closed? In the end, maybe this wasn't a ledger of names. Maybe it was a transcription, a record of echoes, of all the ways children do not die, but continue, waiting for return. She had not spoken since the day she arrived, or so the records claimed. Her name was written only once, Evelyn, on a folded page slipped between the Bible and the hymnal, a child of maybe 10, no more than a pale wisp in hand-me-down linen. Her lips were always sealed, her hands always folded, and her gaze always fixed on something behind you. She was not one of the 7, and that terrified them. The others moved in quiet unison, turning their heads together, blinking as one, walking with the same hesitant grace like birds frightened of glass. Evelyn did not move like them. She lagged, she stared, she aged. In the journals of Sister Magdalene, the last caretaker of the orphan's house, there are 3 entries before the pages go blank, each one shorter than the last. The first speaks of Evelyn's arrival, of her placement in the guest wing, and how she awoke with blood on her sleeves but no wounds of her own. The second notes how she began to hum, not any melody known to hymnal or nursery, but a circular tune of 5 notes, always 5. Sister Magdalene writes, "The other children have stopped moving. They wait for her to finish before resuming." And the third, barely legible beneath smears of ink, reads, "Today she opened her mouth." The account ends there. But a single drawing was found among the sisters' belongings, a rough sketch in graphite of Evelyn, mouth parted, a string of shadows curling from her throat. Inside the dark, 7 faces peered back, each of them blank, each of them crying. One might say it was metaphor or madness, but 2 weeks later, the orphan's house caught fire. No remains were found, no bodies recovered, except one, a child's jawbone fused shut. The fire was never investigated. By then, the townsfolk had already agreed to forget the place. They planted lilies over the scorched stone and called it a garden for the lost. But the garden never bloomed, and the lilies grew upside down. There is no known conclusion to this tale, no final testimony, no confession or revelation, just a stillness that followed the last reported sighting. A traveling priest in 1910 who claimed to see 3 pale children walking hand in hand along the edge of a frozen creek, mouthing a hymn with no words. He said they paused when he passed, stared, blinked in unison, and then smiled, not out of joy, but as though they'd heard something behind him. That smile followed him for the rest of his life. He would write in his final letter, "There is no terror greater than being known by something nameless." So where does that leave us? There are rumors, of course, that the 7 children reappear every generation, attached to no family, orphaned in name only, that they carry nothing with them but silence and symmetry, and that one day, a child who is not one of them will hum the wrong tune and open a door meant never to be opened again. You may never see them, or maybe you already have, in a photo you dismissed, in a newspaper clipping with 7 names and no parents, in the faces of children who look too similar and never blink alone. Some say if you listen closely you can hear them still, not speaking, not crying, but humming. 5 notes, always 5. And just before sleep, if you ever wake to a stillness so thick your breath feels like sin, remember this: some houses do not lose their children, they simply wait for them to come back.